Hey, this is Dr. Keen, and we're just going to go over the second part of this second section of the skeletal system. So we're looking at the pelvic girdle today. We went over the pectoral girdle and shoulder girdle on Monday, or Tuesday, sorry, and now we're going to go over to the pelvic girdle, so the lower extremities, and we're looking at what that's made of and how that's put together and how it works. So pelvic girdle, it's got two coxal bones that are commonly referred to as hip bones or pelvic bones. This is considered one coxal bone, and this is considered another coxal bone. I know this down here is called a coccyx, but that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about this big part here, referring to that as a coxal bone, also referred to as a pelvic bone. So you have this bony pelvis here, and this in the middle, you should know, is the sacrum and the coccyx on the bottom. So those are parts that we've gone over before. We're going to talk about the coxal bones of the pelvis today. So if you look at the large heavy bones on the side, those are the coxal bones that it's talking about, and these are part of the appendicular skeleton now. The sacrum and the coccyx there, those are still part of the axial skeleton. But then you have this SI joint or sacroiliac joint here between the sacrum and the ilium, and that marks the end of the axial skeleton and the beginning of the appendicular skeleton. So these coxal bones or pelvic bones here, those will actually articulate with your lower extremity right there, and that's where your femur will come in like that. And you got a bunch of ligaments and tendons and everything that are holding all that together. So what does it do? It bears most of the weight in your body. So most of the weight, your upper body is most of the weight of your body. And when you're standing up and you're functioning under gravity, that force is coming down on that weight, and the pelvis is bearing that weight. And it's also protecting your reproductive organs and your defecation organs like the bladder and anus and the parts of the large intestine and stuff in there. So this circular area here is where all that stuff sits inside, and so that protects it. So each pelvic bone was formed by the fusion of three other bones. Okay, so this looks like one big bone, but it's actually three parts, kind of like the sternum has three parts. This has three parts as well. So you have the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. The ischium is also called the sits bone. That's what you sit on. The ilium is what you feel when you put your hands on your hips, and then the pubic bone, or the pubis, is actually in the front of your bone, in front of your body, right in the pubic area. So that's why that's called the pubic area, because that's the pubic bone right there. So here's the ilium. It has the iliac crest on the top, and that's what you put your hands on when you put your hands on your hips. And then this is called the ala, kind of like the sacrum had the ala. Remember I told you ala means wings-like, and that's why it's called the ala of the ilium, because it wings out like that. So it connects to the sacrum in the back, and in the front it's open, but then it connects to the other two bones of the pelvis here, the ischium and the pubis. So that's the ilium, which is one part of the pelvic bone. The other part is the ischium here. Like I said, this is also called the sits bone or sit down bone. And this right here is what you sit on. It's called the ischial tuberosity. That's what you sit on when you sit down. And then this right here is the pubis bone in the front. Again, like I said, that actually comes to the front of your body, and it's in the pubic area of your body. That's why it's called the pubic area, because it's the pubic bone underneath it. On the side of this is called the acetabulum. Acetabulum is actually a union point. If you look back over here, it's actually a union point of all three of those bones. They all come together in that acetabulum. Acetabulum is where the femur comes in and connects with the pelvis so that it can move and function when you walk. So that's the acetabulum there. Now, just like with the ribs, where you had true and false ribs, you also have a true and false pelvis. The false pelvis is from the iliac crest to the iliac crest. So this is the false pelvis. The width here is considered the false pelvis. This inlet here, where you have the edge of the ilium to the other edge of the ilium, that's called the true pelvis, and that's what surrounds your organs that we talked about earlier, where you have the urinary bladder and the reproductive organs and stuff in there. That's the true pelvis there. Now, the dimensions of the true pelvis of a woman is important when you're talking about childbirth, and this is actually much larger in a female than it is in a male, and the sacrum and coccyx is positioned differently also to allow for the birthing process. So there is a difference when you look at male pelvis versus female pelvis. If you look at the male, it's very tall and narrow, and this inlet, or the true pelvis here, is smaller, and the sacrum and coccyx kind of come down closer into that inlet. Also, a very strong telltale sign for the male pelvis is this pubic arch right here. If it's less than 90 degrees, it's a male pelvis. If it's more than 90 degrees, then that's a female pelvis, because the female pelvis, as you can see, is much wider. The false pelvis especially is much wider, and even the true pelvis, or the inlet here, is wider also. The sacrum and the coccyx kind of sit back further, and this is more of an open arch here. It allows for the birthing process, and because of that width and more of a flailing out of that pelvis, that's what makes that angle wider here. So lots of differences between these two. If you found two pelvises like underground and you were doing like an archaeological dig or something, this would be the main way to determine whether it was a male or female, is looking at this pubic arch. So that's the telltale sign there. You can see the ischial spines, or the ischial tuberosities here, are different also. They're more pronounced in the male than they are in the female. In that, in the front of the pelvis, like I said, that pubic arch is a big deal. Bones of the lower limbs. So just like in the upper extremity, the lower extremity is set up very similarly. There's a little bit of a difference, but mostly very similar. You have the thigh and the leg, and then the foot and ankle down here. So thigh and the leg. So just like I said with the upper extremity, when you're talking about the top here, this is referred to as thigh, and this down here is referred to the leg. So don't use leg to refer to the whole thing when you're talking anatomy, because that only refers to this part down here. Alright, so the femur is the first part, which is the bone in the thigh. It's the strongest and heaviest bone in your body. Very strong. If you break your femur, it had to be quite a bit of a force that caused that to happen. It slants medially, so if you see this picture over here on the right, you can see how it kind of goes in there. And then it goes back out when it comes down to the leg part here. Now for a male, that's going to be more of a gradual angle. For a female, there's a much bigger angle there. That angle is actually called a Q angle, and that's another way you can determine whether it's a male or female lower extremity. So that angle there it helps the knees line up with the body's center, so that you can have more stability than you would otherwise. So the structure of the femur has this ball-like head here. It is called the head, and this is the proximal epiphysis, right? And it has a neck, just like your neck. So it has a head and a neck, just like you have a head and a neck, and that extends out, and then it's got this big bump on the side that's called the greater trochanter. Then you have the diaphysis coming down, And then you have the distal epiphysis down here. So that's the breakdown of the femur. Then you have the patella, which is another name for kneecap. And this is actually not attached to a bone, but it's connecting, it's touching a bone. It's connected to a bone. So the way that it is attached, though, is it has this tendon called the patellar tendon that holds it down, and it connects to this right here in the front of the tibia, which is called the tibial tuberosity, and it holds that kneecap down so it can track up and down in the joint. The leg, the lower part, is made of two bones, the tibia and the fibula. Don't confuse that, because a lot of people try and call it the tibia and fibia, or the tibula and fibula. It's tibia and fibula. The fibula is the lateral bone, and tibia is the medial bone. The tibia is the thicker and stronger of the two. The tibia is what makes your shin. So like when you feel your shin, that hard surface on the front, you're feeling the tibia. The fibula is kind of just like a brace bone on the side. It doesn't articulate with the knee at all. It makes that pronounced bone on the outside of your ankle. When you feel the outside of your ankle there, that's called the lateral malleolus. So that's the fibula there. And they are connected by interosseous membrane, just like the forearm of your upper extremity. So put those together. There's the shin bone, and which is the tibia. Again, very strong. It forms the knee joint with the femur up here, and then it forms the ankle joint down here with the talus, which we'll look at in a second. So the fibula out here, like I said, it's more of a brace. It doesn't really form any joint with the knee. It kind of protects the ankle joint, but not a whole lot of movement there. So those are the two bones of the leg there, the tibia and fibula. And the foot is the last part. So this is similar to the hand. You have tarsals, kind of like you have carpals in the hand. Tarsals, if you've had medical terminology before, you know that tarso means ankle. And then you have metatarsals, kind of like the hand has metacarpals. And then you have phalanges again, just like you did in the hand. And again, you have 3 in each digit and 2 on the big toe. And these are named distal, middle, proximal, and then distal and proximal. So that's very similar to the hand. The big difference with the foot is you only have 7 tarsals versus 8 carpals in your hand. So your foot supports your body weight, and it allows for movement, helps you to be able to go from place to place. So these tarsals, there's 7 of them, just like the hand has 8. Alright, so we talked about the carpals in the hands, and then we have the tarsals in the foot. They all have a name: the talus, calcaneus, navicular, and then the medial, intermediate, and lateral cuneiform, and the cuboid. So I gave you a mnemonic to remember the wrist bones. Mnemonic to remember these is tiger, cubs, need milk. Now the milk is spelled with a C, but that helps you remember that. Then you have the metatarsals, just like you have metacarpals, and then you have the phalanges here, just like you have in the hand, and you have 14 just like in the hand. 2 in the big toe, and then 3 in the others. And the big toe is number 1, and the others 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the last part of the foot here is the arches. You actually have 3 arches in your foot. You have 2 longitudinal arches. One is medial, and the other one's lateral. So one in the outside, and the other one in the inside. And then you have a transverse arch that goes across your foot. So if you're looking at it at the bottom, you got 1 on the outside, 1 on the inside, and 1 going from side to side. And that is the lower extremity.